So happy 20th anniversary to Sag Calculator. What an exciting time. It's actually not the 20th anniversary today. I missed it. It was actually last September. Oops. But I don't think Sag Calculator will mind. It had a really long delay in sales kicking in. So it's only right that we delay the anniversary celebrations. So this video is especially for Sag Calculator registered users and people who might be interested in buying Sag Calculator or using Sag Calculator. I was going to talk about things, do a retrospective and talk about where Sag Calculator's come from, how the development started, what happened, what went on, talk about where we are now, and also talk about the future. So future Sag Calculator developments. So that's what I'd like to talk about in this video. So happy 20th anniversary Sag Calculator. There's not many software titles out there the last 20 years. And also this version of Sag Calculator that you're installing on Windows 10, it will work perfectly fine on Windows 95, 98, NT, XP, Windows ME, Windows Vista, Windows 7, Windows 8, and Windows 10. The same version of the software will work across anything. Not only that, the other amazing thing about Sag Calculator is if you run it on a 4K screen or an 8K screen, super high-res screens, you can resize the window and all the fonts automatically resize as well. So if you're running Sag Calculator on a modern machine with a super high-res screen, it'll run perfectly fine. If you go back and run it on a Windows 95 machine with a 640 by 480 cathode ray tube, a really low resolution cathode ray tube, it'll run perfectly as well. Just resize the window and everything rescales automatically. I've run so much software, even software from big companies like Microsoft, that cannot run at that cannot run at 4K or 8K or super high resolutions because the fonts are minuscule and the buttons are all minuscule. You can't even click on them, they're so small. But Sag Calculator, perfect. What a great bit of software, and it still runs perfectly. Even 20 years after I developed it, it still runs perfectly on modern machines. So that's wonderful. What a great tool it's been. Okay, and that same functionality with form scaling and icon scaling and GUI component scaling. It's the same thing that I've run across all my applications, all my Delphi applications, all use the same code. It's something I spent a few months in 1996, late 1996 developing. Around about December 1996, I added in the form scaling functionality. And how it works is, okay, people don't want to know, but I'll tell you anyway. So when I first load the application in, I don't display the form, and I look at the form and I get all the coordinates of all the buttons and the icons and the text fields and the labels and all of the GUI components. I get all the coordinates of where they are in the form size when it was designed, and I store those in a special storage area, an array, and then I resize it to the size that the user wants to see it at or to where they drag it at, and I use that array to look up all the components and resize them all accordingly, and I resize the fonts as well, recalculate the size of the fonts. So that's code I wrote in late 1996, and it's still the same code running today, still working perfectly on generations of Windows further. I wrote it on Windows 95, and it's still running perfectly on 6 or 7 generations of Windows later, and massively changed hardware, massively changed screen resolutions. So that's the great thing about Sag Calculator is it still runs, as does all of my other software as well. So very proud of that. Not many people can say that because even Windows can't do it with their infinite resources. They can't get it right. So anyway, a lot more I could say about that. So this a screenshot of Windows XP. That's Sag Calculator running on the Windows XP. That's the version 3 point whatever. I think it was 3.5 or 3.6. Okay, and there's Sag Calculator running on the Windows 10. So it's got the different look and feel. Completely different look and feel. I still love the Windows XP color scheme, but it's got the same. It's the same code, exactly the same code, and running under Windows 10. And I should have got a Windows 95 screenshot as well, but I need to dig one. I need to dig one out. I need to dig into my archives, pull out some old storage drives to find one of those. So the same code's running across all versions of Windows from Windows 95 onwards, and I think that's fantastic. And what else can I say? So it's the 20th anniversary, or it was last September, 20th anniversary. So the Sag Calculator has been going for 20 years. So in this video, I'll talk about where we've come from, how Sag Calculator was developed, where we are now and where we're going. So stay tuned. We'll talk about Sag Calculator some more. So I'm just sitting here looking at Sag Calculator's help file, as you do on a sunny Saturday morning. And I'm just looking through here, and this is over 20 years ago now. Over 20 years ago. So the first public release of Sag Calculator was on the 1st of September 2000, and it's now 5th of June 2021, so it was over 20 years ago, and that's just amazing. Just amazing. In the Sag Calculator help file, all the development histories here, I documented things really well, and but if you go right down to the bottom here, you can see that the work actually started on the 9th of May. So May, June, July, August, September. So there's about 4 months of really hard work in Sag Calculator to get the program ready and released. And the way Sag Calculator started, I was a full-time university lecturer, as well as doing projects on the side. Always doing projects on the side, always working for clients. I never stopped working for clients. But I'll be teaching students during the day and doing projects on my own for clients or for myself after hours. And Sag Calculator started off being one of my students' projects. And a student called Evan, a really nice guy, and but he had some health issues. So he actually brought the project and said, Mike, I found this project that I want to do with ergon energy. And Greg was a guy, Greg Chapman, a really nice guy as well. And I need a supervisor for the project. Can you be my supervisor? So I said, what's the project? And he explained it to me. Calculating the sag for overhead cables, and it's going to be calculating them via different methods. And I said, perfect project. Yes, definitely do it. And so we went and had a meeting with Greg and talked about it and introduced ourselves. And well, Greg had already met Evan. Evan and Greg had already had a few meetings. I think Evan knew Greg out of hours or something, so they knew each other socially, I think. And so that's how the project came about, that Evan heard about it. And so I was brought along as a supervisor to the first meeting on the 9th of May, Tuesday the 9th of May. We went to Ergon's offices and met with Greg, and everything was looking good. The project was going ahead. The university I was going to be a supervisor for it, so Evan got credit for it. Greg was going to be the client that Evan worked for, so Evan was getting work experience, and I think he's going to get paid as well. I'm not sure what sort of arrangement they had. But I was going to be the supervisor for the uni, which is going to be great. Everyone was going to get credit for doing this as a project course. So that was going to be like a 6-month or a 12-month. Count as either one course or two courses that were the 6-month or 12-month, and that would help him work through his degree and get some work experience, some very valuable work experience, and a work reference. So his work experiences was ticking and started before he even graduated, which is a great way to go. And so everything was looking great. Straight after the meeting, I think it was about an hour after the meeting, Evan had a doctor's appointment. And I think I'm just going from memory. My memory's hazy. I'm looking back 20 years. And I didn't keep notes on this part because I didn't want it's his personal stuff. But Evan had a meeting with a doctor, and he had some health issues and had to get into Brisbane for treatment. Fair few hours drive away, and so he couldn't do this project anymore. And so I quickly hunted around for other students. I sent out emails to all my best students and emailed other lecturers, couldn't find another student. So emailed past students that already graduated. Emailed probably 100 people, and I couldn't find anyone that would take the project on. And I thought, this is going to make the university look bad. I've just met with a client who is keen for a student to do this project, and we've just had a meeting today. And okay, it's circumstances out of our control. Evan's got health issues, but I just felt like I couldn't. I never leave a client in the lurch. So I didn't feel I could leave Ergon Energy in the lurch. Even though they weren't strictly my client, I was just a supervisor for a student, and the student was really doing work for the client. I felt I couldn't leave the Ergon Energy in the lurch. So I didn't want to do it, but I ended up doing the project. It was more than I wanted to do. It was more work than I wanted to do, and because I knew it was going to be a lot of work, but I ended up doing the project. Okay. Anyway, like every project I work on, I love writing code. As anyone who's watched any of my videos knows, I love writing code. It's my happy place. And so I actually worked all through the night on Sag Calculator. When I finally realised, oh God, it's going to be me that does this. I couldn't find a student to do it. I couldn't find anyone else that was interested in doing it, past, present, or whatever student. No one was keen to take it on, which really surprised me. But I thought, I'm going to have to do this. So I thought, I bit the bullet. I thought, that's it. I want to get this done as quickly as possible. I don't want this to drag on months. I don't want to be a 6-month project. I want to get it done within a month. Was my plan. Within 2 weeks, I was thinking I'd get it done. So I worked on versions 0.1, 0.2, and sent out 0.2 the next day for review. So and I got it. They got that the next day. So, and it was just a basic user interface. It's just a basic mock-up of how things might work, and sort of the span, the Sag tab and the span tab, and some of most of the GUI controls, but nothing was wired up yet. The code there for working on methods wasn't there. For working on Sags wasn't there, and stuff like that. And over the coming months, things were added in, and so there's the Sag tab and the cable tab, and the various methods that you can use to sag a cable. I think 9 or 10 methods that we need to sag a cable. And tangent 1 span, tangent 2 span are probably the most used. So slowly the functionality was fleshed out, and the settings screen, all the different things for the program was slowly fleshed out over the coming weeks, and end up being months, end up being more than a 4-month development job. Okay, so and it was really Greg had been in ergon energy for a long time. I think that was his career. He'd been in ergon energy for his whole career, and he'd been collecting Sag methods over the years, collecting them. He'd read about something in a magazine and go and explore it and keep it in his little file and hear about some of the Sag cables, for example, the shunt dynamometer. He'd hear about that and grab that and put that details in his file as well. And he collected all these Sag methods, and these are all of the ones he collected. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So there's 12 of them. 12 methods there. And so he collected details for all of these 12 methods, and some of them he was still finding out about. So I'm pretty sure the pendulum and the shunt dynamometer, we added those in late, right at the end. That might have even been adding to a future version of the program. So not all these were present for version 1.0. And so Greg had tables of formulas and calculations and things, and I'd want to see them, but he would read it out to me. So it'd be like this, x squared equals quaternion to the power of 3 times 4.957 times this, and I just have to type in what he was saying because he'd be holding his sheets like this, so I couldn't really see, and because he'd been collecting his stuff for so long, it was his information. He didn't feel like he wanted to give it away, and I understood that. That's fine. I've worked for plenty of clients who are like that. That's fine. People that don't want to give away their secrets, perfectly understandable. But the plan was that later in the project, when the project got up to speed and was released, and that I would take his documentation and scan it and keep it, and also convert the useful parts into the Sag Calculator help file. Okay, so there's the getting started guide. Greg and I worked on this together, and it's a getting started guide of how to get started, and all this sort of stuff. We worked on a lot of this together, and the calculation methods, so you can look at sideboard and all this stuff, the equipment, the pros and cons, the planning. This is all Greg's information. I just typed it in straight from Greg as he read it to me. Okay, so and he would read it too and say, yeah, also add this in as well. So these are all things we worked on together, and I wanted to make it a joint project where Greg got credit as full credit as well, and a share of the sales, but he didn't want that. He just wanted to. He was happy to see the project run, and it was all mine. And I kept saying I should be giving you half of anything I make out of it. And he said you probably aren't going to make much. And anyway, he was right about that. He said it's not going to be a mass market thing. It's going to be very niche, and he was exactly right, of course. Anyway, so on we went, and so he's reading out the formulas to me and what the calculations I need to do, and like this, and then he had piles of test data, and I'd do a compile and hand a program to him, and he'd put all these values through the Sag calculator and check everything's working. He had all these test cases already documented for each method, and he tested them all out and made sure everything was working fine for all the boundary values and edge conditions and everything as well. When you got really mountainous terrain and really flat terrain and things out of whack and whatever, and he tested everything. So by the time version 1 was released, we were really happy that the program worked properly, and there was no errors, none that we could find. And so that was really good. But it was interesting that the whole time Greg was like this, not showing me his formulas, sort of showing me his test data a little bit, but not too much, so it was. I couldn't really see what he had, and that's sort of how it went. And the plan was always, I'll release Sag Calculator, see how it goes. If it starts selling okay, we'll work on the help later. We'll add more into the help. So, for example, see, there's not much here. The pros for the level sighting method, there's no pros, no cons. Planning and technique, there's nothing there. For the sightboard method, there's quite a bit, although we could beef it up certainly. Back. Shunt dynamometer, again, very basic stuff for shunt dynamometer, not much here at all. The plan was to release Sag Calculator with what we had, and if sales kicked in, if the application was a success, we'd fill in all the rest later. And by the time the program was a success, it was over 10 years later. So we're talking about 2010 or later. And by then Greg had retired and moved away. So all the extra things we want to do with these, beefing up the help, we never got to do. Okay. So Sag Calculator was released on the 1st of September 2000. September 2000. There it is, 1st September. That was the first public release. And there was no sales. Okay. And a few days went by. It was only a few days. And I found cracked versions of my Sag Calculator, because back then I used to make it so that the trial version, you could enter the registration codes and it would make it the full version. Okay. And these rotten mongrel hackers had cracked my code and made it so the full version was out there for everybody to use free of charge, probably with malware hidden in it. Okay, because that's what these hackers like to do. You don't get anything for free when you download this pirated software. Often there's little trojans and tricks and viruses hidden in there, so you don't know what you're running when you run this hacked code. You always better off paying the money, getting the code directly from the developer. Because I've been here 25 years. I've been running Moose's Software Valley. I've been developing software for 4 decades. I don't release code with viruses or malware. Never have, never would. All of my code you can trust. Not even an accidental one. Everything of mine gets thoroughly checked it's developed on a highly secure machine. I've got so many tripwires and security things in place. And then before it's released, it's run through tools like VirusTotal, which scan every application against 60 or 70 or more virus checkers. So as well as all the checking and precautions I take, I always run it through VirusTotal, which does a 60 or 70 virus scan check as well, through 60 or 70 tools. And then I'm happy to release it to public. So anyway, and boy, that let the wind out of my sails. So 4 months, nearly a full-time work, it gets released, and then days later, these rotten fucking animals, these thieves, had released cracked versions of my work, giving it away for free, with probably Trojans in. So they're benefiting behind the scenes somehow. They're encrypting your files and charging you ransom or something. Okay, so people downloading this stuff. So that really took the wind out of my sails, and not much happened from then on. So the next release was version 2. Yeah, so it was 7 or 8 months later that I finally got back to work on version 2, because version 1 was released, and it just took the wind out of my sails. So from version 2 onwards, the trial version of Sag Calculator could never be made full. It didn't have all the code in it. It was missing huge chunks of code. So even if they cracked the registration codes, they could not make the trial version fully functional anymore. So that's what I'm talking about here. The severe anti-hacker measures. There was about 20 or 30 measures I added to my code. I spent quite a few months developing these things, and made them so they could apply to all of my applications, because all of my applications were being hacked and cracked. Back then I was selling my shareware for $5 a program. Programs that would take me a week or two of work, I'd sell for $5, and people would just rip it off and crack it and give it away free. So battling hackers did take up a lot of my time until I just decided on doing this, where the trial version could never be fully functional anymore. Then that beat the hackers. They couldn't do anything then. And so yeah. And then we come on to version 2.1, which was May, so March, and then a month and a week later, version 2.1 was released, and then in July, so a year and a couple of months, version 2.2 was released, and then so that was the end of version 2, and then we came on to version 3. So by this stage, only one person had registered Sag Calculator. Okay, and it was I think it was Ergon Energy, and they bought a site license of back then the site license was 10 users, so they pay for 10 users, they get the whole site for free. Boy, did I have to stamp on that quick when some big companies started buying Sag Calculator and giving it to all their contractors and clients and subsidiaries and all these other things. So that's when I had to get rid of the site license rule, because people were just some companies were abusing it. Some massive multinational companies were buying a 10 user license of Sag Calculator, which is a site license, or 20 user, whatever it was, 10 or 20. I think it was 10 at the start. And then they had a site license for their whole site. And they thought that meant all their subsidiaries, all their contractors, all the people they were employing to do work for them, all the third-party companies they were using, they were just giving Sag Calculator to everybody. And people from these companies were contacting me for help. How do I install it? How do I do this? How do I do that? And I say, haven't you read the confirmation email? What confirmation email? Haven't you got the help file? What help file? So there was all these illegal copies of Sag Calculator floating around then as well, and that nearly killed the project. So by this, and then we had version 3 in March 2003, and that was a paid upgrade. So I think that was a $60 upgrade per user. That one. So if you had 10 or 20 users, it was 60 times 10 or 20, whatever the site license was back then. But then site licenses stopped soon after. And then we had version 3.1 2009, so 6 years later, 6 and a bit years later. And then January 2011, so around about 2 years later. And then January 2012, so a year later, version 3.3, that was a very popular release. Sales of Sag Calculator finally started kicking in around version 3.3. Finally, other people were starting to hear about it and buy it. And up until this stage, the months and months and months of work I'd invested into Sag Calculator, I was getting paid about 1 cent an hour. About 1 cent an hour, I'm not kidding. And finally now I was getting up to maybe a few tens of cents an hour. No, maybe 30 cents an hour. So still pretty lousy. But that's what you do when you release shareware or software over the internet. You're not guaranteed sales, and this is a very niche product into a very niche market. Okay, and I wasn't going to the big conferences for the electricity industry, and setting up a little booth to sell my program. So I wasn't doing any marketing at all. I was relying on word of mouth, occasionally people might write an article in a magazine about me, or some of my users send in letters to magazines, electronics, electrical engineering magazines. They'd send in letters to the magazine saying, "Why don't you review Moose's product?" But most of the time, the staff wouldn't bother. I'm just a little company. I'm just a little one-man developer in Australia. What does a big multinational magazine care about me? So version 3.3. That's when things finally started turning around. I finally started getting some sales. So I went from earning 1 or 2 cents an hour to a few tens of cents an hour, maybe 30 cents an hour, I think it was. I worked it all out. At the time. It wasn't much. Okay. And then version 3.4 came 5 months later or so. And then the next year, version 3.5. And then version 3.6 in 2013. And that's the latest version I've released. I have been working on version 3.7 behind the scenes, and I have been working on version 4 behind the scenes as well. Only on and off. I haven't worked on Sag Calculator for over 5 years, probably. It's probably been over 5 years since I've done any coding work on it. And the reason was, if I was getting $1,000 of sales a week, I'd be there coding away. Okay, $1,000. If I was getting $1,000 of sales a month, I'd be there coding away. But when I'm getting $1,000 of sales a year, it's hard to get motivated to spend much time on a project, and that's sort of where we are. So that's sort of where we are in Sag Calculator. It's certainly not a dead project. I'm still a developer. I still own it. We've actually got to a milestone recently where I've got to a volume of sales I'm happy with, and I've asked about 3 years ago. I asked all my registered users, do you want an iPad version? Do you want an Apple Mac version? Do you want a Linux version? Do you want an Android version for an Android tablet? And I sent out about 380 emails to my registered users. It's about 3 years ago. 300 emails, something like that. 300 emails, I think it was. Because I did them in batches of 50 to send from Yahoo. Because if I tried to send to all 300 from Yahoo, it would say too many emails. So I had to do it in batches of 50. So I think it was about 6 emails. Yeah, about 6 emails. I think it was split amongst. And it's about 3 or 4 years ago. And so out of 300 people, maybe two or three wrote back and said they wouldn't mind an Apple Mac version. 1 or 2, I think, from memory. It's all on my webpage. The results of the survey are all on my webpage. Have a look at my webpage. Okay, let's find it. Prior updates. And we'll go Control F and survey. There it is. The survey results are in. Yeah, so there was 4 out of... do I say how many emails I sent? So on 20 September, I emailed all registered users. I think it was about 300 emails I had to send out from memory. Between 200 and 300 anyway, I'm pretty sure. Anyway. Oh no, there we go. 107 registered users. So there's only 107 registered users back then. And 4 said they wouldn't mind an Android version, maybe. 2 said they wouldn't mind an Apple Mac OS version, but they're mainly using Windows. 7 said they'd like an iPad version, but they mainly use Windows laptops anyway. They don't take their iPads out into the field because they're so expensive they don't want to drop them. And nobody said a Linux. So out of 107 people, I got and most of these responses here, some people said they wouldn't mind an Apple version and an iPad version, or some people said they wouldn't mind an Android version, so I put a 1 there and a 1 there if they voted twice. So out of 107 users, I think there was like maybe 10 people that replied. So the response was pretty low. And of course, when you send out something like this and you're waiting for a reply, if less than 10% of the people reply, you think, should I worry? Nobody cares. Should I worry? And if I'd sent out 107 emails and 90 people replied, then we would have had an iPad or an Android version now for sure. send out 107 emails or whatever emails, and maybe 10 people reply, and you think, oh, geez. And if I'm going for an iPad, if I'm going for an Android version, I'm probably going to be dealing with the Google Play Store, which is a nightmare, and developing a special an Android version, which means redeveloping Sag Calculator from Delphi Pascal into Java or something else. And if I'm going for an iPad or a Mac version, well, I could say with Java for the Mac version, for the Mac OS version, but for the iPad version, I'm going to be developing something like Apple C or one of those languages. So it means having multiple full source code trees for Sag Calculator in multiple languages. I could do a web app version, but then what are people going to do when they're right out in the field? When they're 1,000 miles away from the nearest internet connection, and they're trying to do SAGs on their laptop. Web apps don't work very well when there's no internet. You can write web apps that are more like applications that run inside your web browser, and they don't always need the connection. Okay, but that's another thing to do, isn't it? So there's different styles of web app, and then you got all the cross-platform stuff. Really, for me to tackle this, I need not 107 registered users. I need 10, 20, 50,000 registered users to be able to tackle something like this, because this is going to be months and months of work. And I probably would, now knowing what I know now, 6 years later, 7 years later, knowing what I know now, I would probably go for a web app version. So as part of this as well, I did also explore Lazarus Free Pascal, which is a cross-platform Pascal development kit. And I also did explore, I spent 2 days on Embarcado Delphi XE5, which is the latest version back then in 2013. So this is the latest versions. And I spent 2 days on Lazarus Pascal, trying to see how they went for cross-platform development. I was going to try just Windows and Linux to start with, because I don't have a Mac, I don't have an iPad. I have an Android tablet now, although it's died. So I'd have to buy a Mac and an iPad if I was going to do those versions as well, just to test things out. And I spent 4 days on these things, and had a nightmare of a time. You can click those links and read. It's just somewhere else in the page down here. If you click that, it will scroll down to that section. And I had a nightmare with this Embarcado Delphi, and I had a pretty well of a nightmare with Lazarus Free Pascal. Basically, all the promises they made, they failed to deliver. Absolute piles of crap. They're probably better now, but back then they were absolute piles of crap. Sorry if that offends anyone. You spend 4 days trying to install and use software that promises the moon, and and find it delivers very little, and see how happy you are. Even years later, I'm still angry about it. Those 4 wasted days. So that's sort of where we are. I'm happy with the sales of Sag Calculator now, and for Sag Calculator to go to the next level, I really probably need to go, well, do I? There's such a small market even for Windows Sag Calculator. Android, Mac, Linux, an iPad. No one's going to run Sag Calculator on their phone. That would be insane. They would only do it for fun. They wouldn't do it out in the field. It's going to be an iPad or an Android tablet. It's not going to be the iOS phone. So where do we go now? The future. This is supposed to be a retrospective. It wasn't supposed to be a future. Recent updates to my webpage and Mother's Day. Yeah. So where do we go next for Sag Calculator? I don't know. It's really up to the Sag Calculator users, and it's really up to Sag Calculator sales. In fact, it's really up to Sag Calculator sales. For me to go to the next step, because now with all of the work I've done on Sag Calculator, with the over 4 months initial work to get to version 1.0, 4 months more than full-time work. I was working more than 40 hours a week on it. I was working more like 60 or 80 hours a week on it, because I was trying to get it done in that first month. And then 1 month turned into 2 months, and then 2 months turned into 3 months, and then 3 months turned into 4 months, because there's just so much more that Greg was adding in, and more SAG methods, and more testing, and more this and more that, and and more functionality, and the ability to check sags as well as do sags. So the checking and the sagging and all that. So everything just kept fanning out and fanning out. That's all right. We got version 1 done in 4 months. That was fine. But anyway, so 20 years later, I've now, Sag Calculator's paid for all my time, and I'm very happy with that. That's all fine. So we're all square now. But really, to go to the next level, where I'm going to tackle the Android or the Mac or the iPad version, we need a lot more users and a lot more sales, and factoring in things like having to deal with the Google Play Store and being an Apple developer and dealing with the Apple Play Store and all the nightmares they put you through. If you're going to develop an application for these stores, the first thing you want to do is the first step you want to do is a nice simple little app that you can get in quickly, just so you can learn the ropes. Well, I've never done that. I've always just published software to my webpage. I'm a bit of a dinosaur that way. I publish to my webpage, and that's my happy place. Out of all the internet, my webpage is my happy place. It's the one place where everything is I know about, and I understand it all. It all makes sense to me. I know where all my software is. I can just click A to Z and get a list of all my software that's on my webpage. And if I want to see the amendment history, I can just come here and go software updates, and it shows me all the updates going from January 2021 down to the very early days of Moose's Valley, back in July 1996, when I released those programs, and so on. So Moose's Valley is my happy place. That's where I like releasing software. So I don't have to deal with Apple Store and Google Store and anyway. So that's probably it for this video. So I just wanted to look back at the history of Sag Calculator. I missed the 20-year anniversary, although the 21-year anniversary is coming up in September. I missed the 20-year. What a shame, eh? What a shame. Things are so busy. COVID and everything's making the world crazy. So happy 20th anniversary, Sag Calculator, or happy nearly 21st anniversary. You've been a lot of work dealing with those mongrel hackers that released hacked versions of Sag Calculator all over the internet before I had a single sale. I'd love to get my hands on you bastards. I really would. Yes, I teach you not to destroy people's hard work, steal people's hard work. And all the people who have reached the Sag Calculator, I think it's. Let me have a quick look. Yes, I've just checked, just done calculated things up, and as of today, the 5th of June, Sag Calculator has 311 registered users. Okay, so that could be 10 for one company, 5 for another, 1 for one company, 1 for a contractor. So just adding them all up, all the individual usernames that are registered. And so someone bought 10 licenses, there'd be 10 there. If someone bought a site license, which back in the early days was 10 users or 20 users or whatever, then there would be a 10 or a 20 there. Okay, so that's 311 total registered users. But because some people are still using their site licenses, even though they don't apply anymore, some people are still using them. There could actually be a lot more people using Sag Calculator than that, because I know some companies, I'm not going to mention any names, some companies were handing out free copies of Sag Calculator to their contractors and subsidiaries and third-party businesses they used and things like that. So some bad things happened. But 311 people. So to you 311 people, I say thank you so much for supporting Sag Calculator. Thank you for supporting the training videos. Thank you for supporting the development. Even though development's stalled really since 2013, I am tinkering behind the scenes. I am thinking about things. The only thing stopping us from going ahead now, like I said, is we need more sales, really. It's coming into more sales. I need to get to 1,000 or, I'll be mad to tackle it with 1,000. We need 10,000 sales at least for me to start looking into web app versions at this stage, okay? Now, with one of my clients I'm working at now, I am doing some web app development in C# and Blazor. So that might short circuit things. That might reduce the amount of effort and time and learning I need to do to find out about web app development, so that I can move into a Sag Calculator, into a web app environment. But we'll just have to wait and see. Because with web apps come a million and one issues. Security. Where's the data stored? Where's the application stored? How do I roll out new versions? If the application's in the cloud, how do I protect it from hackers? If people are storing their data with Sag Calculator in the cloud, how do I protect their data? Because people aren't going to want to share their, if Ergon Energy's competitor managed to get access to Ergon Energy's data in the cloud, that would be a nightmare. Okay, I'd be out of business. I'd be sued out of existence, or whatever. So yeah, when you move things into the cloud as a web app, it's a whole other level of hurt you can suffer. Desktop apps, beautiful. Cloud apps, where they're in the cloud 24 hours a day for anyone to take pot shots at, and and the thing with cloud apps as well is I'd have to probably buy something like Azure server, a license for Azure server, which means yearly fees, maybe hundreds of dollars a year, maybe thousands of dollars a year. So then Sag Calculator wouldn't be a sales model, it would be a subscription model. So all that changes as well. We're then talking about a subscription model for Sag Calculator. Not $350 Australian to buy a license. It might be $350 Australian per year per license. I don't think people would like that. Maybe they would. Maybe they'd accept it. I don't know. Maybe the world's changed. Anyway, thanks for your support, everyone. All 311 of you. Thank you for your support. And have a great 2021. Take care. Bye-bye.